Eleanor Montgomery stared down the barrel of her father's old Remington, her hand trembling as she faced the three men who had broken into their modest homestead outside of Cottonwood Springs, Arizona territory. It was 1885, and at 22 years old, she never imagined she'd be defending what little she had left in this world all on her own. "I suggest you gentlemen leave the way you came," she said, her voice steadier than her hands. "I ain't much for conversation when uninvited guests help themselves to my property." The leader of the group, a tall man with a jagged scar across his cheek, laughed. "Look at this, boys. The Montgomery girl thinks she's something fierce." His eyes narrowed. "Your pa owed money. Since he ain't here to pay it, we'll be taking what's owed another way." Eleanor cocked the rifle. "My father's debts died with him 3 weeks ago. Now get off my land." What happened next was a blur. The man lunged forward, and Eleanor squeezed the trigger. The shot went wild, splintering wood from the doorframe. A commotion erupted outside, thundering hooves and shouting causing the intruders to curse and scramble back toward the door. "This ain't over, Montgomery," the scarred man called as he retreated. Through the open door, Eleanor glimpsed a tall figure on horseback, revolver drawn. The three men mounted their horses in haste and galloped away, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Eleanor's knees finally gave out as she slumped against the wall, the rifle clattering to the floor beside her. "Madam, you all right in there?" A deep voice called from outside. She didn't answer, couldn't find the words. Heavy boots crossed her porch, and then a man filled the doorway, silhouetted against the setting sun. He stepped inside, holstering his weapon, and Eleanor got her first clear look at him. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair beneath a well-worn Stetson. His face was tanned from long days under the Arizona sun, with striking blue eyes that assessed the situation quickly. "Those men won't be back tonight," he said, "but they will return." Eleanor raised her chin. "And who might you be?" "Cole Armstrong," he replied, removing his hat. "I work at the Silver Spur, Mr. Holden's ranch to the north." He gestured toward the ridge. "Saw the commotion on my way back from town. Well, Mr. Armstrong, I appreciate the assistance, but I can handle my own troubles." He glanced at the overturned furniture, the broken window, and the rifle on the floor. "Seems like you've got more than your share of troubles, Miss Montgomery." Eleanor Montgomery. She pushed herself to her feet. "And yes, trouble follows me like a shadow these days, but that doesn't mean I need saving." Cole's expression remained neutral. "Everyone needs help sometimes, Miss Montgomery. No shame in that." Eleanor walked to the door and pulled it open wider. "Thank you for your intervention, Mr. Armstrong. Good evening." Instead of leaving, Cole leaned against the doorframe. "Those men, they're Harlan Wade's boys. Wade's been buying up land all around this valley. If they came calling, you're in his sights. I'm aware of Mr. Wade's ambitions. He made my father several offers for our land. Each was refused. And now your father's gone." It wasn't a question. Eleanor swallowed hard. "Yes. Pneumonia took him 3 weeks ago." Cole nodded solemnly. "My condolences." He paused. "Miss Montgomery, it's not safe for you to stay here alone tonight. Wade's men might return with reinforcements. I'm not leaving my home. I'm not suggesting you do. I'll stay on your porch tonight. Keep watch. Tomorrow we can figure out a more permanent solution." Eleanor bristled. "There's no we in this situation, Mr. Armstrong. I've managed on my own since my father fell ill, and I'll continue to do so." Cole's eyes held hers. "Miss Montgomery, I respect your independence, but this isn't about capability. It's about numbers. One person against Wade's crew isn't a fair fight, no matter how determined that person might be." Eleanor knew he was right, but admitting it felt like surrendering something precious, the fierce independence that had kept her going since her mother died when she was 16. She'd nursed her father through his final days, buried him alone, and was determined to keep the land he'd loved. "Fine," she conceded. "You can sleep on the porch. But come sunrise, we're parting ways." Cole nodded, his expression giving away nothing of his thoughts. "I'll fetch my bedroll from my horse." When he stepped outside, Eleanor released a shaky breath and surveyed the disarray of her home. The modest cabin had never felt so vulnerable. She began straightening furniture, sweeping up broken glass, trying to restore order to her disrupted life. Through the window, she watched Cole tend to his horse, a magnificent bay stallion, before retrieving his bedroll and canteen. There was an efficiency to his movements that spoke of a man accustomed to hard work and self-sufficiency. Despite her resistance to his help, Eleanor found herself grateful for his presence as darkness settled over the land. Later, after securing the repaired window as best she could, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea. A soft knock came at the door. "Miss Montgomery? I've got some coffee brewing if you'd care for some." She opened the door to find Cole sitting on her porch step, a small fire burning in a circle of stones he'd arranged, coffee pot nestled in the embers. "I don't make a habit of accepting refreshments from men I've just met," she said. Cole glanced up at her. Probably wise. He poured a cup and offered it to her. But sometimes exceptions need to be made. Against her better judgment, Eleanor joined him on the porch, accepting the steaming cup. The night air carried the scent of sage and juniper, and stars filled the vast sky above. "Your father's land, it's good grazing territory," Cole remarked after they'd sat in silence for a while. "It's more than that," Eleanor replied. "My parents came here from St. Louis 12 years ago. Built everything from nothing. This land isn't just property, it's their legacy." "My legacy?" Cole nodded thoughtfully. "Land means something different out here. It's not just dirt and grass, it's freedom." "Exactly." She studied him over the rim of her cup. "You speak like someone who doesn't have land of his own." "Observant." He smiled slightly. "I've been working other men's ranches since I was 16, saving what I can. Someday I'll have my own place." "Why help me then?" "Surely Mr. Holden would reward you for helping Wade acquire more land for him to use." Cole's expression hardened. Mr. Holden and Wade are very different men. Holden built his ranch through honest work. Wade builds his empire through intimidation and worse. He set his cup down. "Besides, I don't take kindly to men threatening women, regardless of land disputes." Eleanor wasn't used to allies. After her mother died, it had been just her and her father against the world. Now, with her father gone, she'd resigned herself to fighting her battles alone. "I appreciate the sentiment, Mr. Armstrong, but my problems are more complicated than you realize. Wade's men will return, and one night of protection doesn't solve anything." "What if it could?" Cole asked, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "What if there was a way to keep Wade at bay permanently?" Eleanor laughed without humor. "Short of selling my land or shooting him, I don't see many options." "There's another way." Cole turned to face her fully. "Wade preys on the vulnerable. Single women homesteaders, elderly folks with no family. People he can intimidate. I'm not easily intimidated. I've noticed." A smile tugged at his mouth. But Wade doesn't know that. He sees a young woman alone and thinks, easy target. "What if you weren't alone?" Eleanor narrowed her eyes. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Armstrong?" "An arrangement," he said carefully. "A partnership of convenience. Wade wouldn't be so quick to threaten a homestead with a man present, especially one with connections to the Silver Spur." "You can't be serious." Eleanor stood up, indignant. "I barely know you, and you're proposing some sort of business arrangement." Cole finished calmly. "I need land to start building my own herd. You need protection and help maintaining this place. It could benefit us both." "And what would this arrangement entail exactly?" "I move into your father's old bunkhouse. Help with the work. Make my presence known in town so word gets back to Wade that you're not alone anymore. No strings attached." Eleanor shook her head in disbelief. "That's absurd. People would talk." "People always talk," Cole countered. "Question is, would you rather face their gossip or Wade's thugs?" Eleanor paced the small porch. "Even if I considered such a preposterous idea, what would you want in return?" "No man offers help without expecting something." "A fair question." Cole stood up, towering over her in the dim light. "Use of some of your grazing land for a small herd I've been building. I've got 15 head penned at Holden's place. He's been generous, but I need my own range if I'm going to grow the herd." Eleanor considered his words. The proposition was unconventional, perhaps scandalous, but it addressed her most pressing problems. Still, trusting a stranger with access to her land, her home. "I need to think about this," she said finally. Cole nodded. "Take all the time you need. I'll be right here until morning, as promised." Eleanor retreated inside, her mind racing with possibilities and concerns. Through the window, she watched Cole bank the fire and settle onto his bedroll, rifle within easy reach. She didn't know this man, had no reason to trust him, Yet something told her he was exactly what he appeared to be: honorable, straightforward, and potentially the ally she desperately needed. Sleep evaded Eleanor that night. By dawn, she had made her decision. When Cole awakened, Eleanor was already outside, drawing water from the well. The rising sun cast long shadows across the yard, promising another hot Arizona day. "Good morning, Miss Montgomery." Cole approached, hat in hand. Eleanor set the bucket down. "I've been thinking about your proposition, Mr. Armstrong. And I have conditions." She looked him squarely in the eye. "You'll stay in the bunkhouse, as you suggested. You'll respect my privacy and my authority on this land. This remains my property, regardless of our arrangement." Cole's expression remained serious. "That's fair. If at any point I decide this isn't working, you'll leave without argument." He nodded once. "Understood. And this arrangement remains strictly business. No complications." At this, a slight smile touched his lips. "I never mix business with pleasure, Miss Montgomery. You have my word." Eleanor extended her hand. "Then we have an agreement, Mr. Armstrong." His large hand enveloped hers, warm and calloused from years of ranch work. "Call me Cole. If we're to convince people we have some kind of partnership, formality won't help our cause." "Very well. And you may call me Eleanor." She withdrew her hand, feeling strangely flustered. "When will you bring your cattle?" "I'll ride to the Silver Spur today, speak with Mr. Holden about my departure, and make arrangements to move my herd. Should take 2 or 3 days." Cole settled his hat back on his head. "In the meantime, keep that rifle loaded and stay vigilant." Eleanor's expression hardened. "I've survived this long, haven't I?" Cole studied her face. "Yes, you have. That's why I know this partnership will work. You're not looking for someone to rescue, you just someone to stand beside you." His assessment was surprisingly perceptive. Eleanor had never wanted to be saved. She simply wanted what everyone in this harsh territory needed: an ally against the wilderness, and those who would take what wasn't theirs. "I'll see you in a few days, then," she said. Cole mounted his horse with the fluid grace of a man who had spent his life in the saddle. "I'd recommend you visit the sheriff while I'm gone. Make a formal complaint about Wade's men. Establish a record." Eleanor nodded. "I plan to ride into town today regardless. We're running low on supplies." "Good. Let people see you. Let them know Eleanor Montgomery isn't hiding from Wade or anyone else." Cole tipped his hat. Until then, as he rode away, Eleanor felt a curious mixture of relief and apprehension. She had just aligned herself with a virtual stranger, invited him onto her land, into her life. It was either the wisest decision she'd ever made or the beginning of a new set of troubles. 3 days passed with no sign of Wade's men, for which Eleanor was grateful. She had visited the sheriff as Cole suggested, though the lawman seemed unconcerned by her report. "Property disputes are civil matters," he'd said dismissively. Eleanor suspected Wade had the sheriff in his pocket, like many other influential men in the territory. On the afternoon of the 4th day, Eleanor heard the distant lowing of cattle. She stepped onto the porch, shielding her eyes against the sun, and saw a small herd approaching, accompanied by 2 riders. Even at a distance, she recognized Cole's broad-shouldered silhouette. As they drew nearer, Eleanor assessed the cattle, mostly Herefords, with a few Longhorn crosses. They appeared healthy, if dusty from the journey. Cole rode ahead of the herd, leaving the second rider to guide them toward the corral behind the bunkhouse. "Miss Montgomery," Cole called as he approached. "Hope we're still welcome." Eleanor couldn't help but smile at his formality in front of his companion. "Of course, Mr. Armstrong. Your timing is excellent. I've just finished airing out the bunkhouse." Cole dismounted, introducing the second rider as Danny, a young cowhand from the Silver Spur who had helped drive the herd. "He'll head back tomorrow," Cole explained. "Just needed an extra hand for the drive." The 3 of them worked together to settle the cattle into the corral, which hadn't held livestock since before her father's illness. As they worked, Eleanor observed Cole's efficient management of the animals, his gentle but firm handling, and the respect Danny showed him. Whatever his role had been at the Silver Spur, he had clearly earned the esteem of those he worked with. That evening, Eleanor invited both men to eat at the main house, a gesture of hospitality she felt obligated to extend. Over a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee, Danny shared news from town. "Word is Wade's been asking questions about your place, Miss Montgomery," he said between bites. Seems mighty interested in who's living here now. Eleanor exchanged a glance with Cole. And what's the word in town about that? Danny grinned. Well, thanks to Cole here making it known at the saloon before we left that he's taking up residence as your business partner, folks are plenty curious. Some are betting on how long before it turns into more than business. Eleanor felt her cheeks warm. People have active imaginations. That they do, Cole agreed, his expression neutral. But as long as the right information reaches Wade that Eleanor Montgomery is no longer alone on this land, let them talk. After supper, Danny retired to the bunkhouse with Cole to prepare for his return journey the next day. Eleanor remained in the kitchen, washing dishes and contemplating how quickly her solitary existence had changed. For months, she'd eaten alone, worked alone, worried alone. Now there were voices and movement on her property again. The following morning, after Danny departed, Eleanor found Cole repairing a section of fence that had fallen into disrepair. He'd removed his shirt in the growing heat, and she paused, momentarily flustered by the sight of his sun-bronzed back and shoulders as he worked. There's water in the bucket by the well if you're thirsty, she called, forcing her voice to remain casual. Cole turned, wiping sweat from his brow. Obliged. He pulled his shirt back on before approaching the well, a gesture of propriety she appreciated. I thought we might discuss how this arrangement will work day to day, Eleanor said as he drank. Cole nodded. Good idea. You mentioned conditions, but we should establish clear boundaries for both our sakes. They sat in the shade of a large cottonwood tree, the only respite from the relentless sun. Eleanor outlined her expectations. Cole would manage his own herd and help with general maintenance of the property. She would continue to oversee the house, garden, and chickens. They would divide the cost of supplies and share profits from any cattle sales. And what about in town? Cole asked. How do you want to present our arrangement? Eleanor hesitated. I suppose business partners is accurate. Though people will assume what they will regardless. True enough. Cole leaned back against the tree trunk. Wade needs to believe I have a vested interest in this land that I won't just pick up and leave if things get difficult. And do you? Have a vested interest? Cole met her gaze steadily. I do now. My cattle are here. My future depends on building that herd. And I gave my word to stand with you against Wade. Eleanor nodded, satisfied with his answer. Then we'll let people draw their own conclusions. As long as we know the truth of the matter. The next few weeks settled into an unexpected rhythm. Eleanor found herself adapting to Cole's presence more easily than anticipated. He was respectful of her space, diligent in his work, and brought a comforting sense of security she hadn't realized she missed. One evening, about a month after Cole's arrival, Eleanor was hanging laundry when she saw riders approaching 3 men, moving with purpose. Her heart quickened as she recognized the lead rider, the scarred man who had threatened her before. Cole, she called, moving quickly to retrieve the rifle she kept by the door. He emerged from the barn instantly, alerted by the urgency in her voice. Seeing the approaching riders, he positioned himself beside Eleanor, his hand resting casually near his holstered revolver. Wade's men? He asked quietly. Yes. The one with the scar is the leader. Calls himself Jenkins. Cole nodded once. Follow my lead. Let them see we're united. The riders pulled up about 20 feet from the house. Jenkins surveyed the scene, his eyes lingering on Cole before shifting back to Eleanor. Miss Montgomery, he called. I see you've acquired help since our last visit. Eleanor stepped forward, rifle held confidently, but not aimed. Mr. Jenkins, this is Cole Armstrong, my business partner. Cole, this is one of Mr. Wade's representatives who paid me an unwelcome visit previously. Cole's expression remained impassive. Gentlemen, he acknowledged with a slight nod. What brings you to Montgomery land? Jenkins smiled unpleasantly. Mr. Wade sent us to deliver a message. He's raising his offer for this property, $500. That's more than generous for land this far from town. The land isn't for sale, Eleanor stated firmly. Not at any price. Mr. Armstrong and I have plans for this property that don't include Mr. Wade. Jenkins's smile faded. Armstrong, you're new to these parts. You might not understand how things work in Cottonwood Springs. Mr. Wade generally gets what he wants, one way or another. Cole stepped forward, his posture relaxed but his eyes hard. Is that a threat, Jenkins? Just sharing some local wisdom. Jenkins adjusted his hat. Miss Montgomery, I suggest you reconsider Mr. Wade's generous offer. Next time, he might not be in such a charitable mood. Eleanor felt a flash of the old fear, but Cole's steady presence beside her bolstered her courage. Mr. Wade's mood is of no concern to me. Now, unless you have business beyond delivering rejected offers, I'll thank you to leave our property. The tension stretched between them for several long moments before Jenkins finally nodded. We'll relay your response to Mr. Wade. He turned his horse. Don't say you weren't warned, Miss Montgomery. As the men rode away, Eleanor released a shaky breath. Cole placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You handled that well, he said. They'll be back, she replied, her voice tight with worry. Yes, they will. Cole's expression was grim. But next time, we'll be better prepared. That evening, after a quiet supper, Cole surprised Eleanor by asking about her life before Arizona Territory. St. Louis was all I knew until I was 10, she explained as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in golds and purples. Father worked as a bookkeeper for a shipping company. Mother taught piano. We had a comfortable life. What made them leave for the frontier? Eleanor smiled at the memory. Father always dreamed of open spaces. He'd read about the West since he was a boy. When he inherited some money from an uncle, he saw his chance. Her smile faded. Mother was hesitant, but she loved him enough to follow his dream. And you? Did you share his dream? I was a child. Adventure sounded wonderful. She laughed softly. Reality was somewhat different. Our first winter here, I cried myself to sleep most nights, missing our cozy house, my friends, the conveniences of city life. But you stayed. Made a life here. Eleanor nodded. Mother taught me resilience. Even when things were difficult, she never complained. She made this harsh land beautiful somehow. She swallowed hard. After she died, keeping this place going became even more important. It was her home, too. Cole was quiet for a moment. My mother died when I was 8. Fever took her within days. Father was never the same after. I'm sorry, Eleanor said softly. Is he still living? No. Bar fight in Dodge City when I was 15. I've been on my own since then. The simple statement explained much about the man beside her, his self-sufficiency, his watchfulness, his determination to build something of his own. We're quite the pair, aren't we? Eleanor observed. Both orphaned, both stubborn enough to chase impossible dreams in this unforgiving country. Cole's mouth curved into a small smile. Stubborn is one word for it. I prefer determined. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something shifted between them, a recognition of kindred spirits that transcended their business arrangement. Eleanor looked away first, unsettled by the warmth spreading through her chest. It's getting late, she said, rising from her chair. Good night, Cole. Good night, Eleanor, he replied, his eyes following her as she retreated into the house. The following weeks brought increased activity from Wade's men. Nothing overtly threatening, just frequent appearances on the boundaries of Eleanor's property, watching, sometimes following at a distance when she rode to check fence lines. Cole began accompanying her on these rides, a silent protector whose presence both reassured and unsettled her. The problem wasn't Cole himself. He had proven to be honorable, hardworking, and respectful. The problem was Eleanor's growing awareness of him as more than a business partner. She found herself noticing things she shouldn't. The way sunlight caught in his dark hair, how his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the gentleness in his large hands when he tended to an injured calf. These unbidden observations troubled her. Their arrangement was meant to be practical, uncomplicated. Developing feelings would only lead to heartache when their partnership eventually ended. One afternoon, Eleanor rode into town for supplies. The general store owner, Mrs. Peterson, greeted her with unusual warmth. Eleanor, dear, how lovely to see you. The older woman leaned across the counter. We've all been so curious about your new arrangement. Mr. Armstrong seems like a fine gentleman. Eleanor maintained her composure. He is indeed. Our partnership has been beneficial for both of us. Mrs. Peterson's eyes twinkled knowingly. Partnership, is it? Well, that's a sensible way to describe it. Though I must say, when he was in last week buying supplies, the way he spoke about you suggested perhaps something more developing. Eleanor's heart stuttered. Oh, what exactly did he say? Nothing improper, Mrs. Peterson assured her. Just the respect in his voice when your name came up. And he was quite particular about selecting that bolt of blue calico, said it would match your eyes. Eleanor blinked in surprise. She hadn't seen any blue calico. I'm sure you misunderstood his intentions, Mrs. Peterson. Ours is strictly a business relationship. The older woman patted her hand. Of course, dear. Though it would be a shame if it stayed that way. Good men are scarce in these parts. Later, as Eleanor loaded her purchases into the wagon, she spotted Jenkins and another of Wade's men watching her from across the street. They made no move to approach, but their presence sent a clear message. They were still interested in her property. When she returned home, Eleanor found Cole constructing a new chicken coop near the house. The old one had been falling apart, but she hadn't mentioned replacing it. What's this? She asked, setting down her parcels. Cole hammered in another nail before answering. Figured the hens deserved better accommodations before winter sets in. The old coop wouldn't keep out coyotes, let alone the cold. You didn't have to do that. Eleanor examined his handiwork, impressed by the solid construction. Wanted to, he replied simply. How was town? Eleanor hesitated, then decided honesty was best. Wade's men were watching me, and Mrs. Peterson was quite interested in the nature of our arrangement. Cole set down his hammer. Did Wade's men approach you? No, just observed from a distance. He nodded, clearly relieved. And Mrs. Peterson? What did our local gossip have to say? Eleanor studied his face. She mentioned you purchased blue calico. Said you thought it would match my eyes. A faint color touched Cole's tan cheeks. That was meant to be a surprise. A surprise? Cole rubbed the back of his neck, a rare gesture of discomfort from him. Your birthday is next week. I noticed the date marked on your father's calendar. Thought you might like something. I don't know. Something pretty. The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Eleanor deeply. That was very kind. It's nothing. Cole returned to his work, seemingly embarrassed. Just seemed like you could use something that wasn't practical for a change. Eleanor found herself at a loss for words. No one had given her a gift in years. That Cole had not only noticed her birthday, but planned something special, something frivolous and unnecessary revealed a consideration she hadn't expected. Thank you, she said quietly. Cole looked up, meeting her eyes. You're welcome, Eleanor. Something changed between them after that day. Their conversations extended beyond the practical matters of the ranch. They began sharing meals more frequently, lingering over coffee as they talked about books they'd read, places they hoped to see, dreams beyond their daily existence. Eleanor found herself laughing more than she had in years, discovering a lightness she thought she'd lost when her parents died. On the evening of her birthday, Eleanor returned from tending the garden to find the table set with her mother's good china and a small vase of wildflowers in the center. Cole stood awkwardly by the stove, wearing a clean shirt, his hair still damp from washing. Happy birthday, he said, gesturing toward the table. I'm not much of a cook, but I managed to put together something that might pass for a special dinner. Eleanor was speechless. The simple stew he had prepared, the freshly baked bread from Mrs. Peterson's bakery, the wildflowers, all of it represented an effort she hadn't expected. This is wonderful, she finally managed, emotion making her voice unsteady. Cole pulled out her chair. There's this, too. He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was the blue calico Mrs. Peterson had mentioned, along with a small wooden box. When Eleanor opened it, she gasped. Inside lay a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. Cole, this is too much. It was my mother's, he explained quietly. Only thing of hers I kept. Thought it should belong to someone who would appreciate its beauty. Eleanor stared at him, understanding the significance of such a gift. I can't accept this. It's too precious. Please, he said simply. I want you to have it. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, Eleanor felt the last of her carefully constructed barriers begin to crumble. This man, this kind, honorable man had worked his way past her defenses without even trying. Will you help me put it on? She asked softly. Cole took the necklace, his fingers brushing her skin as he fastened it around her neck. The brief touch sent warmth cascading through her. Perfect, he murmured. Eleanor touched the locket where it rested against her collarbone. Thank you. For everything. They ate dinner by lamplight, talking and laughing with an ease that felt both new and familiar. As the evening grew late, Eleanor realized she didn't want it to end, didn't want to return to the careful distance they'd maintained until now. I saw Wade in town today, Cole said suddenly, his expression growing serious. He approached me directly. Eleanor tensed. What did he want? To buy my interest in this property. Offered me twice what my herd is worth if I'd convince you to sell. What did you tell him? Cole's eyes held hers. I told him this land already belongs to the most stubborn, determined woman I've ever met, and that I'd be a fool to bet against her. His mouth quirked into a half-smile. Then I suggested he look elsewhere for property, as neither of us is interested in selling. Eleanor felt a rush of gratitude and something deeper, something she was afraid to name. He won't give up easily. No, Cole agreed. But neither will we. The use of we wasn't lost on Eleanor. In just a few months, they had become a unit, a partnership beyond the practical arrangement they'd agreed upon. The realization was both comforting and terrifying. 2 days later, disaster struck. Eleanor was alone at the house, Cole having ridden out to check on a broken section of fence, when smoke began rising from the barn. She ran outside to find flames already licking at the wooden structure. Grabbing buckets, she raced to the well, knowing even as she did that the fire was spreading too quickly to be contained. She was struggling with the third bucket when Cole galloped into the yard. He leapt from his horse and joined her frantic efforts. But it was clear the barn couldn't be saved. Together, they focused on keeping the flames from spreading to the house or bunkhouse. By the time they had contained the fire, the barn was a smoldering ruin. Eleanor sank to the ground, exhausted and soot-covered. This wasn't an accident, Cole said grimly, surveying the destruction. The fire started in 3 places at once. Someone wanted to make sure it couldn't be stopped. Wade, Eleanor whispered, devastation washing over her. Without the barn, they would struggle to store hay for winter. The cost to rebuild would drain what little savings she had left. Cole knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. We'll rebuild. Better than before. With what? Eleanor asked, despair creeping into her voice. This was Wade's message: he'll destroy everything until I have no choice but to sell. Listen to me. Cole's voice was fierce. That man will not take your land. I promise you that. Eleanor looked at him through tears of frustration. Why do you care so much? This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. Cole's expression softened. Because it's yours, and because. He hesitated, then continued more quietly. Because somewhere along the way, you became more important to me than any piece of land or herd of cattle. Eleanor stared at him, stunned by his admission. Cole. He shook his head. I know this wasn't part of our arrangement. I know you wanted to keep things uncomplicated, but I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is just business. Before Eleanor could respond, the sound of approaching riders interrupted them. Cole stood quickly, positioning himself between Eleanor and the newcomers. 6 horsemen rode into the yard, Wade himself at the lead. He was a heavy-set man with cold eyes and an expensive suit that looked out of place in the dusty landscape. Terrible business, fires, he called as they approached. So unpredictable out here with all this dry grass. Cole's hand moved to his holster. State your business, Wade. Wade smiled thinly. Just being neighborly, Armstrong. Saw the smoke, thought I'd check if assistance was needed. His gaze shifted to Eleanor. Miss Montgomery, it appears you've suffered quite a loss. Perhaps this is a sign that ranching is too difficult an enterprise for someone in your situation. Eleanor stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. If you're implying you had something to do with this fire, Mr. Wade, that's a serious accusation. Merely making an observation. Wade adjusted his gloves. My offer still stands $500 for your property. Given recent events, that seems more than fair. Cole stepped forward. The lady said the land isn't for sale. I suggest you and your men leave before this situation escalates. Wade's expression hardened. You're outnumbered, Armstrong. And the sheriff is a personal friend of mine. Be careful who you threaten. That works both ways. Cole replied evenly. Now get off our land. For a tense moment, Eleanor feared violence would erupt. Then Wade nodded to his men, and they turned their horses. Think about my offer, Miss Montgomery, Wade called over his shoulder. It expires tomorrow at noon. When they had disappeared from sight, Eleanor released a shaky breath. What do we do now? Cole's expression was grim. We fight back. But first, we need to get word to some friends. By nightfall, riders began arriving at the Montgomery homestead, cowboys from neighboring ranches, small farmers, shopkeepers from town. Word had spread about Wade's intimidation tactics, and many had suffered similar experiences. Cole had spent the afternoon riding to nearby properties, rallying support. "Wade's gone too far," declared Thomas Holden, Cole's former employer from the Silver Spur. "Burning a woman's barn crosses a line none of us can ignore." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathered crowd. Eleanor watched in amazement as more than 20 men gathered in her yard, each expressing their support. "What's the plan?" someone called. Cole stepped forward. "Wade expects to find Eleanor vulnerable and alone tomorrow. Instead, he'll find all of us." A show of unity, proof that this community won't stand for his methods anymore. The meeting continued late into the night, strategies discussed, plans made. Eleanor moved among her unexpected allies, providing coffee and food, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. As the crowd began to disperse, making arrangements to return before dawn, Eleanor found Cole standing alone near the burned-out barn. "You did this," she said quietly. "Brought all these people together." He shook his head. They were ready to stand up to Wade. They just needed someone to make the first move. Eleanor moved closer, her heart pounding. "What you said earlier, before Wade arrived. Did you mean it?" Cole turned to face her fully. "Every word. I know it complicates things. I'm not afraid of complications anymore." Eleanor interrupted. "I'm afraid of regret. Of not speaking the truth when I have the chance." She took a deep breath. "And the truth is, I've fallen in love with you, Cole Armstrong. Somewhere between your ridiculous proposal to be my business partner and you building me a chicken coop, you became essential to me." Cole's expression transformed, hope and joy replacing the grim determination of moments before. "Eleanor," he breathed, stepping toward her. His hands framed her face with infinite tenderness. "I've loved you since the night you sat on your porch and told me you didn't need saving." Eleanor smiled through sudden tears. "I still don't need saving, but I do need you." When their lips met, Eleanor felt as though everything in her life, all the loss, the struggle, the fear had been leading to this moment. Cole's arms encircled her, strong and secure, and for the first time since her father's death, she felt truly at home. The following day, when Harlan Wade rode onto Montgomery land at noon, he found not a vulnerable woman ready to surrender, but a united front of neighbors and friends. The message was clear. Eleanor Montgomery was not alone, and she never would be again. Wade, confronted by the determined faces of much of the community, including several of his own workers who had defected upon learning of the barn burning, had no choice but to retreat. The balance of power had shifted decisively. That evening, as the sun set over the desert, Eleanor and Cole stood on the porch of their home now, and surveyed the property. Already, plans for a new barn were underway, with neighbors volunteering labor and materials. "You know," Cole said, his arm around her shoulders, "when I first proposed this arrangement, I never imagined it would lead here." Eleanor leaned into his embrace. "I thought I was too much trouble, too stubborn, too determined to go it alone." Cole pressed a kiss to her temple. "You are trouble, Eleanor Montgomery. The best kind." His voice grew serious. "When I look at you, I see everything I never knew I wanted. And I'd fight 100 ways to keep you safe, to keep this land that means so much to you." "To us," she corrected softly. "To us," he agreed. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn day, Eleanor Montgomery became Eleanor Armstrong in a ceremony attended by nearly everyone in Cottonwood Springs. The newlyweds stood on the porch of their home, now flanked by a new barn and expanded corrals, as friends and neighbors celebrated their union. "Not bad for a business arrangement," Cole whispered in her ear as they watched the festivities. Eleanor smiled up at her husband. "The best investment I ever made." As dusk fell and the guests began to depart, Eleanor and Cole remained on the porch, watching the stars appear over the land they both loved, the land they would pass down to their children and grandchildren in years to come. "Thank you," Eleanor said softly, "for seeing something in me worth fighting for." Cole drew her close. "You were always worth every fight, Eleanor. Always." And as they stood together, silhouetted against the light from their home, Eleanor knew that some troubles were worth embracing, especially those that led to the greatest love of all.